This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us. With me today is Richard Fields and John Cameron, and I am never going to get used to that new intro. It's
It's short, so that there's some benefit in that.
I know, but I still don't view myself as host of the show. It's still Richard's show in my mind. Anyway,
hey,
even
man,
though I've been doing
step up to the plate. You're it now.
Yeah, apparently I've been donated. I've been what's the donated is not the right. Well, maybe I have been donated. Nominated. Volunteered. Yeah, I've been volunteered.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a volunteering. Up in Smith College, I apologize. A lone whistleblower has kind of taken on the woke racists up there. And I know, John, this is one you sent here to us. So what did you have to say about that one?
Well, I sent it, and I maybe should have read it in a little more detail before I sent the, because I assumed the show was going to be tomorrow. But anyway, so Smith College, this young lady from Smith College, she graduated from Smith College in 1993. She's a single mother, has 2 children, and she has basically been just kind of crushed under the woke racism. Examples, she'll be in meetings where people are pounding their fists on the table talking about rich white women, rich white women, rich white women, and that's basically who goes to Smith College, or used to in the past. And, everybody's afraid to speak up because they get crushed by the completely illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and unjust treatment they receive if they try to object to any of the basically racism that's happening on these college campuses and classism. If you disagree with what these newly empowered socialist types who apparently think that all rich white people are bad and all people of color are good, and that racial quotas to address centuries-old wrongs are okay, even though those are illegal and unconstitutional and immoral, then you get crushed under those people. And she said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore, and sent a letter to a resignation to the people at Smith College stating that she wasn't going to. And apparently they offered her a settlement, and she said, no, I'm facing financial uncertainty, but this is just so egregious that I can't deal with it anymore. And, there's... And then in the rest of the article, which I think maybe we should make some of these articles available for people who want to go into more detail. And
we post them on with the show. We do post them.
All right, shows you how much I know. There was example after example after example. In one, somebody was accused of filing a complaint on a racial basis, and without investigation, without evidence, without anything on hearsay, they put the person who was accused of it on leave and published a public apology on behalf of the school, and said they would do whatever they could to make sure that this kind of racism didn't happen. But what they're actually have implemented is out and out racism. I mean, everybody is classed as one way or another based upon the color of their skin. That is racism. And, if you give people favorable treatment due to the color of their skin, that's racism. If you give them unfavorable treatment due to the color of their skin, that's racism. So in the name of protecting against racism, and all the other woke things, it's not just racism, it's all the isms, any objection to
if you make
into the LBGHQ, whatever it is, I don't even know all the initials, that's an ism. Anything that doesn't buy into socialist thought theory, that's an ism. Go ahead, James.
Anyway. They've made trying to make the safe environment for everybody. They've actually made the environment unsafe for a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
whether you're a rich white woman or a straight
Well,
white man, or any of these other the categories
Well, we
that are
have-
the oppressive categories.
What we have to state first and foremost is that racism is wrong. Whether it's white against black or black against white or yellow against green, it doesn't make any difference. Judging people by race and to the exclusion of all other personal qualifications is just simply wrong. And when whites discriminated against blacks, which happened from the beginning of our country up until the present day, that's wrong. But likewise, reverse discrimination is wrong. Discriminating against whites to supposedly make up for past racial discrimination against blacks, that's also wrong. It's the basic logical fallacy that if there is an evil, an opposite evil will fix it. No, an opposite evil will not fix an evil. What you need to fix evil is good. And the good is non-discrimination, not reverse discrimination. And Smith College and the New York Times newsroom, most of academia have decided to go the illogical route of fixing racism with reverse racism as opposed to non-racism. And that's the underlying logical and the underlying problem that we have going on here. And until enough people like the lady at Smith College speak up and say nonsense, it's going to be a continuing problem. And right now, a lot of people, particularly in academia and politics, are afraid to stand up and say this is wrong. It's wrong for discrimination, no matter where it comes from or no matter who is the victim.
Yeah, well, it almost seems like we have white people being racist against white people. And in terms of cases like Smith's College, where you've got mostly white staff essentially being racist against their mostly white students. It seems very strange that we're trying to fight racism with more racism, and then we end up surprised that we've got more racism running around.
I have a question.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we have in monetary policy. We have too much debt, so we're trying to fight too much debt with more debt. More racism doesn't fix racism. Less racism fixes racism.
There was a Supreme Court justice who said the way you end when people were talking about quotas and tacit quotas for I think it was mostly jobs. He said the way you end racism is by ending racism. In other words, what Richard said and what you said, James, earlier, you can't attempt to implement one kind of racism to make up for the fact that there was another kind of racism, because it's all racism. I get in trouble talking to my left-leaning friends when Barack Obama was elected president, and I asked why that, what were the reasons you voted for him? I said, well, and usually the second or third reason, sometimes the first, was he was black. And I said, oh, so you're a racist. And they got really upset with me, and I said, so if you vote against someone because of their skin color, then you're a racist. Doesn't it follow that if you vote for someone because of their skin color, you're a racist? I mean, the right in this country is guilty of egregious things and hate mongering, a different kind of hate mongering. But I think that the left's identifying people simply by their race so that they can manipulate them into their votes is kind of some of the most immoral and egregious behavior that I've ever seen in this country. And the fact that it's now so endemic in academia that there's absolutely nothing that, like Richard said, people are afraid to speak up, afraid to even raise their hand, afraid to voice an opinion, afraid to come forward. But this very, very brave lady at Smith College was, maybe some other people will step forward as well. I hope so.
Well, for families like mine, my grandchildren quite literally are racially mixed across the globe, quite literally across the globe, this whole racial discussion is very peculiar. It's like, what race is my grandchild? She has black, white, Asian. My other grandchild is black, white, and Hispanic mix. What race are they? They're the human race. They're not black. They're not white. They're not Hispanic. They're not Asian. They're human. And at some point, we have to get past all this dividing ourselves up. Our next issue is in the Boston public schools. They have suspended the new advanced learning classes because white and Asian kids are doing too well. And so because those kids are doing too well, you don't get to go to advanced classes. You've got to go back and be bored in normal classes. Because that's what's going to happen. These kids are going to go back to normal classes, and they're going to be bored out of their flipping mind.
Yeah, yeah. And similar to what
similar thing happened in with my kids. They went to school in Davis Public Education, and my two daughters qualified for the GATE program, which is similar to the program that you're talking about in Boston. Gifted and talented education, and if you passed a test, if you showed that you had the intellectual cojones to enter the program, you did, and if you didn't, then you went to a normal classroom. When I was growing up, we had the A class and the B class. The A class was for the college prep. The B class was trade prep, and there are certain forms of education that are more appropriate for different people. It's silly to try to force somebody into college prep whose desire in life is to be a machinist or a mechanic. Likewise, it's silly to force somebody whose desire to be a nuclear physicist into being a carpenter. You let people go where they have the talent to go. Let people go where they have the God-given abilities to prevail, and get the public education system out of trying to determine who should go where, whether it's in gifted and talented, or whether it's in industrial arts, or whatever it might be. But I think that the underlying problem is one of public education, where the government schools typecast people in one way or another, whether it's gifted, whether it's everybody has to do the same thing, whatever it is. If you have no choice, and that's what the people in Massachusetts are asking for, they're saying, don't give children any choice, put them all into the same stew pot. That is not going to be optimum for anybody other than the mythical average person, and most people are not average. Otherwise, average doesn't mean anything.
Well, absolutely agree. I think at one time my daughter was in the GATE program here in California. So the same thing is happening they have a wonderful public schools or government schools in New York that I think 17 Nobel laureates graduated from, and they have a test to get into these schools. And it is the most rigorous testing, I think, for any schools in the country, because they're high schools. And what was happening is, in the eye of the racist administration, the mayor of New York, de Blasio, I think, didn't like the fact that too many Asians were getting into these classes and not enough Hispanics and blacks, that there was a preponderance of, in some of these neighborhoods, there was a lot of black students, a lot of Hispanic students, a lot of Asian students, but the people getting into these schools were overwhelmingly Asian. And people before had the same problem when the people getting into these schools were overwhelmingly Jewish, because different classes of immigrants come in and are willing to work harder, and they earn their way by bootstrapping. And the same things happened in Boston, but in a completely different way. The Boston schools are 80% Hispanic and black, and the kids who are qualifying for these advanced programs are the majority of them, I think 80%, are white. And somehow, because the most gifted people who are passing a completely objective test happen to be white, there's something wrong with the program. So performance is colorblind. That performance flat out is colorblind. You don't care when you're hiring for a job in commerce or industry, or whether you're going in to be operated on. You want the best surgeon. You don't care if that surgeon is pink, yellow, green, black, white, yellow, whatever. You want the best cutter to cut on you. You want to have the best and the brightest in positions of authority, and you want to have the best and the brightest in critical positions, and you want the best and the brightest running businesses so they can create jobs and all the rest of this. And this idea that somehow we have to fill a racial quota at every part of our life is no better and perhaps worse than all of the other crazy laws we had keeping blacks out of neighborhoods and from marrying whites and all the rest of this. And it's just immoral. And I thought we were past this as a country, but there's a recurrence of it. And there's a recurrence of it because it fulfills a political need by one party or the other. And that need is a need to make people identify with something so they feel as if they're being under someone's thumb so they can get their vote. And that's it, pure and simple. And that's why I find it just so totally immorally wrong.
Well, it bothers me because it seems that it's the questions we don't ask because we focus on this. It's like, okay, so we have a majority of white kids, despite going into these high over programs, these high academic programs, despite the fact that we have a majority of black kids in the school district. How are we screwing up so badly to educate these black kids that the white kids are doing so much better? What are we doing wrong? What are we fundamentally doing wrong with our education system that these poor children or these black children or Hispanic children or whatever group of children you want aren't doing well? We're doing something wrong. It's not the children's fault. It's ours.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely.
They're children. And, childhood is for practice. And so children failing isn't actually a problem. The problem is when we don't understand why they continue to fail. And we're not asking the questions of ourselves.
No, I absolutely agree. What is going on in these classrooms? What's going on in the involvement of parents in education that's working for, statistically for one demographic of the student body and not working statistically for another? And that, in some case, maybe we can make that question less painful by asking it a different way. What are these people doing right? And how can we make what they're doing right? What is the environment, the school, the teacher, the parent relationship? What's going on that works there? How can we push that out to the people where it's not working? What can they do to look at what's going on here that's breeding success and emulate it so they can breed success? And that's the way I'd like to ask that question.
But I think we have to be careful because one of the things these pilot programs show us is they design a pilot program that fits a neighborhood and it does very well in that neighborhood. And then they go and try and take it to another similar neighborhood and it doesn't work because the differences are subtle enough where you actually have to design each program for each school, for each individual neighborhood. And so you really can't take this one-size-fits-none approach and pass it on. You have to be very careful. Yes, you can take lessons and say, hey, this is what they're doing over here. Can we apply any of that to help us? But you still have to take the children that are in front of you and say, okay, how do I educate those children? Not how do I educate the mass? How do I educate the non-existent average? How do I educate the little Johnny and Susie that's sitting and standing in front of me?
Yeah. And we can pretty much guarantee that will never be done with a top-down approach, which is what a government approach is. It's like you said, one size fits none. I think, put the money for education back in the hands of the parents, put the decisions back in the hands of the parents, and you're going to find better outcomes. And I think, if one thing good has come out of this pandemic, well, a couple of things. That people have learned how to wash their hands and not sneeze on other people. But the other one is they've realized how absolutely horrible public school education is and how completely unfeeling the teachers union representing the teachers are about their actual job, which is educating little Johnny or little Esmeralda or little Hoisin or whoever it is. They've absolutely proved they have no interest in doing that. They're simply interested in their jobs and their pensions and their power. And I think maybe they'll start chipping away at that power and put the educational dollars back in the hands of the parents so they can make whatever decision they want to make for their own children. Maybe.
Decentralization and choice rather than centralization and power mongering.
Well, that brings us right on to our next one. California can now enforce its new net neutrality law.
Ah,
Yeah, they're talking about
Yeah.
centralization and decentralization of choice. Net neutrality is one of the biggest misnomers that I think has ever been foisted on us in the last number of years. And that's saying something because we've had a number of misnomers foisted on
yeah,
us.
I don't, yeah, net neutrality is not neutral. It's the opposite of neutral. And yeah, I'm, and what's interesting is that the interstate commerce laws have basically been used to reach through to ridiculous levels of local commerce and say, the original case back in the 30s, a guy was growing more corn for his own livestock. And
Wheat.
because, what? He was born,
Wheat.
more wheat. Wasn't he growing feed corn? He was growing wheat. Anyway, he was growing something. And they said that he must stop growing it because by the act of growing it, he wasn't going to buy it from someone who could sell it across state lines. So that's how ridiculous the reach of interstate commerce is. But in the one case where it's absolutely and totally and thoroughly interstate commerce, because by its very nature, the interweb is diffused across the globe. Their argument is that those rules don't apply. So state of California can create its own rules and basically direct who has power and who doesn't in the interweb. Well, I like to call it that just to upset my daughter. We all know it's the internet. And so it's
Yeah, I mean, you have a situation where
crazy.
The lust for power among the political class is so strong that they are essentially ignoring all of the precepts of the First Amendment, the right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, and so on. And any kind of regulation, whether it's net neutrality or trying to get Fox off of cable or any number of different things, all of those actions are gussied up to be so in the name of truth and fairness, but what they really are is attempts to stifle voices that disagree with whatever a politician is trying to enact that law. And anything that takes away from freedom of press or freedom of, in this case, the freedom of the internet, which is essentially an extension of press, just like radio and television were an extension of newspapers. It's the ability to talk about your ideas without being stymied or throttled by government. That's what net neutrality advocates are trying to do.
Yeah, it seems to me that we're putting more control of the internet into government rather than getting government out of control of the internet, and it's not a good thing. We've already seen, what was it today? I just read today some Democrat lawmaker was demanding Robert Kennedy Jr. be taken off Twitter because of his stance on vaccines. But if a politician is demanding someone be taken off Twitter, is that not politicians censoring an individual?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if it's you and me, that's one thing, but that's an actual politician, an actual lawmaker demanding of a public company to stop doing business, to stop allowing someone to use their service.
Yeah, it is politicians setting themselves up as the arbiters of truth. Now, we all know that businesses have to be truthful in their advertising, etc. But politicians very specifically don't have to be truthful in political advertising. And we all know that politicians, whenever a politician opens his mouth, it's not truth that's coming out. And setting up politicians as the arbiters of the truth, how crazy can you get?
Well, if their lips are moving, they're lying. So I want to just go a little bit deeper into net neutrality. As I understand it, basically, these people like AT&T and Comcast and all the rest of that, who've invested trillions or billions in creating these basically canals, just like the canals in Venice, but they're canals for data, are now being told that they have no control over who or how fast people can travel on the canal they created, and they can't have someone pay them more money so that they're allowed to go faster, and they can't have other people who are paying them less money go slower. But somehow this is now net neutrality. And I just don't get how people don't see through it, that this is once more, as Richard stated so very clearly, just the attempt of government to control the exchange of ideas. Because if you control the exchange of ideas, you can snuff the voices that disagree with you and promote the voices that do.
Yeah, well, if you're a cable operator and you want to say, hey, look, Netflix is using 25% of our bandwidth, and so we want to take a chunk of that and make sure our viewers, our customers always have a solid chunk of things. So we want to dedicate 28% of our bandwidth to Netflix. So they always have some, and that's going to mean that some other small person isn't going to get so much. And for you and your customers, that's fine because they're all going to notice. But now you have to go to the government and say, hey, Mr. Government, can I actually chunk off this chunk of things for Netflix so my customers have a better experience?
I like my Netflix, man. I don't want to mess with
we need to avoid being defenders of AT&T and Netflix.
Well,
and,
no, I
and,
agree.
Cable operators.
I agree.
Because
I'm not defending Netflix.
they all have sweetheart deals with the government.
Oh, yeah.
It's a matter of total deregulation entirely of the internet.
Well, I should.
That's the direction we need to go, and we're going. The politicians would have us go in the exact opposite direction.
Well, I think pretty soon the 5G is going to fix a lot of this. And I agree that AT&T had a monopoly for years and it was broken up, and then it bought its way back to one, and Comcast certainly does in its area. And there was way too much regulation of the internet and all the rest of that. But, once somebody's invested actual money in something, telling them they can't charge whatever the market will bear is, as long as you let somebody else, invest the same money. Somebody else wants to string cable. But once 5G is all over the place, it's going to be a whole different world out there. You can once there's enough towers up, you'll get faster speeds through the air, which was available for years. And the people who fought it were who? These very cable companies that you're talking about, and the government, because they don't want the freedom of information to pass through the air.
Now we're looking at satellite internet. Elon Musk is putting up a whole bunch of low-flying satellites to provide internet service to underserved rural areas, as well as every place else. There is no shortage of methods by which competition can enter the internet space, and it should be encouraged, not discouraged.
Yeah,
Yes,
Starlink is actually quite exciting because it can actually create a second internet if they so choose. They can simply avoid all this problem of the controlled internet here and have their own Tesla internet up in the sky, so to speak. If he built that technology in there, and it's a strange thing. So we may very well someday be having two internets. You may get space internet and Earth internet or some such thing. That is all the time we have for today, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
from those here, Libertarian Counterpoint. I forgot where I was going. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. And
I think this is where you say love everybody.
Love everybody. And I was supposed to do the show stuff, the promotions, and I forgot all of that, and it went right out of my head. We'll see you guys next time.
Gil's slipping in somewhere.